A very good morning and welcome to this morning's Euractiv virtual conference on the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Today we will be asking, can effective oversight bring about true reform? And today's event is supported by Recover Portugal, so expect lots of concrete examples dealing with that country as we talk about what needs to happen as these resilience funds come out, these recovery funds come out to help the different member states recover from the pandemic. Now, as always, you can follow us along on social media using the hashtag #EADebates, and of course you can use the Q&A function to put your questions to our panellists. Please do indicate which panellist your question is directed towards, or if it's to all of them, please put that as well. And there's also a chat function where you can say hello to your fellow audience members, but keep the Q&A for our panellists. We have a great lineup for you today, so without any further ado, I will introduce you to Luc Thonliat, who is the Director for the Economies of the Member States in DG Economic and Finance Affairs at the European Commission. His colleague, also from the European Commission, Nathalie Berger, is Director Support to Member State Reforms, and that's within DG Reform. We also have joining us Ivana Maletic, who is a member of the Chamber of Regulations of Markets and Competitive Economy at the European Court of Auditors. Eulalia Rubio is the Senior Research Fellow at the Jacques Delors Institute. And last but not least, Ana Costillas, spokesperson for Recover Portugal. Thank you all very much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and a lively discussion that I hope will bring in all the various viewpoints from the stakeholders here today, as well as, of course, our audience. I am opening up our Q&A function, so although you haven't heard the opening statements yet, feel free to listen and pay attention because you can base some of your questions on that. With that, I will have a round of opening statements from each of our panellists. I'm going to start, Luc, first with you. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. And by way of introduction to our discussion, I would like to put forward the three initial propositions for the sake of discussion. First, I think it's important to approach the Recovery and Resilience Facility for what it is, an instrument which is here to promote the recovery and the resilience of the economies of the member states. And in so doing, the facility complements a very important set of economic support and crisis management measures that have been taken over the last 15 months by the EU and the member states. All of this constitutes an unprecedented economic response to what has been an unprecedented economic crisis. My second proposition is to make sure that in our discussion we bear in mind the unique features of the facility. Its size, it varies a lot across countries, but overall it has a potential of close to 5% of EU GDP. Its scope, this is an instrument which covers both reforms and investment, and this is very new. The nature of its financing, both loans and grants, again, this is a new development at EU level. And last but not least, and I'm sure we'll come back to that, the delivery mode, the fact that this is a performance-based instrument where disbursements will be linked to the achievement of results, not just costs. This is profoundly new at EU level. My third and last proposition is to say that the fact that the RF is a new instrument certainly creates new challenges in terms of implementation, but it is important to highlight and bear in mind the fact that the RRF regulation provides for very important safeguards to ensure that there will be an effective and sound management of the RRF. And in the implementation, we can also count on well-established partnerships between EU institutions and together with member states to make it work. So these would be my initial first ideas, and I very much look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nathalie, let me come to you. You're also at the Commission, but working in a slightly different way. So tell me what it is from your perspective that is important about today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And I think I will embark on Luc's introductory comments. And I would like to show the interaction with the work that we're doing in the structural reform support Director General. So first, to quote my Commissioner Ferreira, growth-enhancing reforms are a precondition for sustainable and inclusive growth. Investment alone is not enough to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Our administrations and frameworks also need to be constantly strengthened and modernized. It is our goal not to leave anyone behind. I think here we have several very powerful concepts. We need to have a recovery that is going to be inclusive. So every region, every actor in the European Union should be able to benefit from that recovery. And in that respect, we do support member states through what we call the technical support instrument, by strengthening their administrative capacity to design and implement structural reforms and address the underlying social and economic weaknesses in their economies. And we can support a very wide range of reforms. I can give you a few examples, like strengthening policy development and foresight civil service in Ireland, introducing artificial intelligence in investment and trade in Belgium, strengthening the judicial system, thus enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of the courts in Cyprus, developing a transport and mobility master plan in Estonia, or helping to establish a new research network in Poland. And we can intervene in support to the member states' recovery and resilience plans for their preparation, for their implementation. We have also very recently published a second call for the member states to present their proposed measures and reforms, and they have the possibility until the 4th of June to select and present a few projects to obtain some additional support from the technical support instrument. Of course, all this is work that we do hand in hand, so we try to support, for example, Luc's colleagues for the implementation of the national recovery and resilience plans. I think if we have to say one word to describe all of this, we will only succeed by working all hand in hand, all institutions, and together with the member states and all actors concerned in the member states. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your giving those concrete examples. We really do love to hear those. And perhaps we'll come back a little bit more and talk about how those are chosen. Ivana, let me turn to you. Give us your perspective, your opening thoughts this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you today. And in the European Court of Auditors, I was responsible for the opinion on Recovery and Resilience Facility regulation. I'm also now responsible for the audit for Commission assessment of the national recovery and resilience plans. In the Court of Auditors, we also prepared many opinions on the regulations for other instruments under NextGenerationEU, and very interesting review on COVID-19 economic policy response. I completely agree with my colleagues from the Commission that RRF is a very unique instrument, very important and necessary European response to the huge health and economic crisis. It is definitely an expression of our unity and solidarity, and shows that in the crisis time we can act together and overcome the challenges and achieve more. And this is really what we are all hoping for. We hope that RRF will be our success story. However, in the opinion, we of course highlighted some of the weaknesses in the regulation and challenges for the implementation and monitoring of RRF. For example, we said that the scope and objectives of the RRF, as Luke actually said, they are very broad, and they also partially overlap with other EU funding instruments. On one hand, this can be an advantage in terms of complementarity and synergy, but also this increases the risk of double funding and competition between different programs. This is why we also highlighted the absorption capacity and need to improve absorption, because we all see that even in this perspective, 2014-20 previous perspective, many countries had difficulties to absorb available funds, and now some of them will get even double funding, and they have to, of course, deal with that, and they have to really spend it in a proper way, but also very quickly that our citizens see the fruits of the European funding as soon as possible. But of course, we will have time to discuss all this, and I cannot now present everything what we highlighted in our opinion, but during the debate, I'm sure that we will have more time. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ivana. Yes, we're looking forward as well to hearing your responses. Indeed, we will have the next hour still to go with more conversations and discussions. But Ilalia, let me turn to you. Tell us about your research and your background on this.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to all of you, and good morning to all of you. Just, I mean, as a general statement, maybe I will repeat a bit what the other panelists have said, but I think it's important to stress that the RRF is really new in many dimensions, and particularly we try to do two things that are totally new. One is this idea of coupling investment with reforms, and the other is the delivery system, as Luke has said, to change from a delivery system that normally the monitoring of EU's fund has been based on more control, more reporting, and rules compliance, and now we switch to a system that is basically based on performance. And the two directions, coupling investment with reforms and going towards a more performance-oriented system, are very welcome. I think it's two things that were already in the debate, and we tried in the past to align more, for instance, structural funding with country-specific recommendations under the European semester. We try also to simplify the rules for structural funding and to put more performance-oriented approach in structural funding. So two things are very good, but we are doing it in a very radical way and in a very short way and with a lot of money. So that just, I mean, what I wanted to stress as a first statement is that we are in front of a large-scale experiment that's very good, but we have to also be open to understand that everything will not go as we expect. And as any experiment, there will be some failures, there will be some unexpected events. So I think it's very important. I mean, for the moment, we are quite happy. I think everybody has the perception that the plans are quite good. But now in the implementation phase, we have to be aware that as much as the Commission will do things right, there will be some failures. And what is important is to have a bit of flexibility, a bit of capacity to readjust, and to set ambitious but also realistic expectations on the results. And then in the debate, we can enter into detail about more specific things that we can also do. I think the regulation is very good, but there are things that have to be maybe done to complement this regulation. And I can work and I can talk later on the question of how to prevent fraud. I think that we need a different approach to prevent and identify fraud for the facility, which is not all integrated in the regulation. So I stop here, and then we can discuss in more detail.
Absolutely. Anna, let me come to you. Give us your opening thoughts to frame how you see this debate.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ana Costillas, and I'm here today in representation of Recover Portugal, which, if you don't know, is a group of EU institutional investors whose assets were expropriated by the Portuguese government back in 2015 in the Banco Espírito Santo Novo Banco case. For the last 6 years, we have been seeking legal redress in the Portuguese courts, but their judicial system is completely politicized, and to date, unfortunately, we do not have any indication on when this case will be solved. The full details, I will not go now here, but they are all available in our website, recoverportugal.eu. As regards the NextGenerationEU, we are obviously fully supportive, and we are fully supportive of the RRF as a way to recover the EU economy after the pandemic. But as well, we as investors, we would like to recover the over 2 billion euros which were unduly taken from us, as well as to ensure that before investing in future RRF bonds, our rights will be protected too. In fact, as you all know, a significant part of the RRF funds will be raised in international markets. And for us, it's imperative that investors' rights will be protected if the EU wants to sell those bonds at market prices. The rule of law should prevail across the EU, and both domestic and foreign investors should be treated by the host member state fairly and without being discriminated, so that we ensure a level playing field across the EU, and that legal proceedings should be dealt with in a timely manner. Otherwise, investors will have less incentives to invest not only on Portugal, but on EU-wide bonds. There have been many recommendations and reports highlighting the shortcomings of Portuguese judiciary systems. And in fact, in their own proposal for the RRF plan, they do propose to finance the digitalization of their administrative and tax judiciary systems. We believe, though, that there has to be a conditionality factor here, and that prior to the approval of the Portuguese plan, it is in the interest of the EU to request to the Portuguese government enough guarantees to solve the best Novo Banco cases as soon as possible. This is a signal that many investors are waiting for. We also believe that overall, the RRF funds have to be rightly spent in accordance with their country-specific recommendations and their national plans. And the European Parliament, the Court of Auditors, the EPO, and the other institutions should be involved in their oversight to avoid any mismanagement and corruption practices, which will secure through structural reforms which are so needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Going into some detail there. Luke, let me pick up on some points that the various opening statements have raised. Now, there's a huge amount, a significant, unprecedented amount of money available. It's 672.5 billion euros. That's innovative financing, but it is going to be deployed over quite a short period of time. It's 6 years. This is, if you like, crisis funding. So I wonder, how can that be tied with fundamental reform, which usually takes place at a slower pace? Yeah,
thanks, Jennifer. 6 years is both a very long and a very short time, depending on how you look at it. For a number of investment projects, 6 years is not that long before delivering on the project and actually seeing the results on the ground. For a number of reforms, on the other hand, you could hope and move faster. So the reality of what is at stake will depend very much on the type of measures, but also very much on the countries. We discussed the fact that the amounts will vary a lot according to countries. And you mentioned the overall potential of 672.5 billion. This is including the full amount of grants plus loans. At this stage, it is not such that all member states will choose the loans. The loans will remain a possibility, but in the first phase, not every country will choose to tap their full loan envelope. So we'll have to see. As you may know, 18 countries have presented their plans so far. More will come in the coming days or weeks. So we don't have a full overview just yet, but that will be a case-by-case assessment. I think the regulation is very helpful in steering the right type of reforms and investments. As was mentioned by my colleagues on the panel, the fact that the regulation refers to the country-specific recommendations that were adopted in the past is very important, because it shows that we will build on a shared diagnosis of what needs to be done. So we're not starting from scratch. Likewise, the regulation sets very important targets for green and for digital objectives, respectively 37% of the funds and 20% of the fund. It also ensures the respect of a do not significant harm principle from an environmental point of view. And this raises the ambition across the board. So there are, I would say, there's an initial direction given by the regulation, and also the fact that the reforms and investments have been, in a way, designed bottom-up through the member states in dialogue with the Commission is also a guarantee of ownership and hopefully of success. So, of course, the jury is out. We're just at the starting phase, but I would say the initial impulse is a positive one.
Well, Natalie, similar sort of question to you, and I noticed you taking down various notes during Anna's intervention as well. Give me your thoughts on whether the speed, as Luke says, it's long and short depending on how you look at it, but 6 years is a short enough amount of time if we want to see fundamental structural reforms.
Well, it is a short amount of time, but at the same time, I really believe that with all the efforts that are being organized by the Commission and within the member states and the context that we're having within member states, we are going to make it work. Look at what has been put in place within a few months. I mean, take just the example of vaccinations. Usually to develop a vaccine, you need up to 10 years. Now we have been able to put in place a vaccine in less than 1 year, and we're advancing very well in vaccination in the European Union. So this is advancing well. We have had the Commission putting forward the proposal for the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the co-legislators adopting it at incredible speed. On our side, we are used to supporting reforms in the member states, and we can see that where there is really a willingness of all and a constructive attitude, all can become possible. So I do believe that this will be possible, and I think that precisely what was mentioned beforehand, the idea of the milestones and targets and the performance-related implementation of the RRF is going to be extremely helpful in that regard.
Well, just a quick follow-up question, Natalie, drawing on what Eulalia said, and she seemed to be indicating that we need flexibility, but that there will be some failures. Is there a sense in which some of these failures, as they may be called, are predictable? I mean, how can you do forward planning when everything is moving in flux? As Luke pointed out as well, we don't even have all the plans yet.
Well, I would come to you with a question. I mean, what do you mean exactly with failures? And I think that precisely the way that everything is framed does avoid the failures. I give you the example of the measures that we can support, the structural reforms that we can support with the technical support instrument, which complement the efforts of the Recovery and Resilience Facility and can assist the member states for the implementation of the plans. We provide directly the support to the member states. We do not give money. We do not give a partial financing. So all the concerns that have been expressed in the past with the use of European funds could be alleviated. And I have very well heard the reference to the risk of double funding. I'm not going to enter into many operational details, but we have put in place all the measures in order to avoid that there be any risk of double funding. So I do believe that we, of course, will need to remain vigilant. In the European Commission, we are very vigilant. We work really collectively in a team. We exchange information, we exchange responsibilities, we exchange tasks. And so I do believe that there may be, of course, here and there a minor hiccup happening. It would not be rational to pretend that there is absolutely no risk of anything, but I do not believe that we can see a risk of major failures.
Well, Eulalia, then you raised this issue. Let me come back to you to answer the question there that Natalie just put.
Yeah, I do not think there will be major failures. There will be unexpected events, and there will be some plans, for instance, that will have some delay. There will be some reforms that will not occur at the time that were expected. So, of course, there will have some milestones not fulfilled. So that's why what I refer by failures, not major failures, but of course, we have to be prepared that everything will not go as expected. And of course, the regulation has already the instruments to respond to that. There is an article, for instance, that allow the Commission and the member state to readjust the program. Imagine, for instance, if there is a change of government in one member state and they want to change the composition of reforms they have put forward in the plan. So these types of things are referred as failures or as unexpected events. I think we need a bit of flexibility to adjust to these unexpected events or to delays in implementation that might happen during the execution of the facility.
Great. Well, one of the areas that we want to talk about today is the rule of law specifically, because in the Council Summit last July, they agreed that the recovery funds would be attached to rule of law, and it was a long road to get there. How important, Ivana, do you think that is? And I mean, and is this one area where there is a possible cause for concern with certain states?
Yes, definitely. So this is something what we discussed at the beginning in relation to ESI funds and any other fundings from the European budget. And now, of course, with Recovery and Resilience Facility, this is also on the table. And with the rule of law, we actually also, in a way, ensure a level playing field all over the Europe. And it is very important if you are not following the treaty obligations and some fundamental obligations, then it is fair and just that you don't benefit from the funds. And also there is a huge risk that that country will not actually use it in a proper way, in a legal and regular way. So this is definitely something what we have to stick to. But always with all conditionalities, we have to be cautious in a way that we don't want to block the implementation of the funds at the same time. Now, I'm not talking only about rule of law, but any other conditionality. So one has to strike right balance between what has to be achieved and conditions under which this has to be done. And of course, for some conditionalities, we cannot argue, we cannot actually do step back, and something is definitely must, and the rule of law is one of these. And I will just reflect a little bit on reforms. So rule of law is also connected of the reforms of judiciary system, for example. So as you said, many reforms are actually long lasting, and for some we are saying that they are always like going on reforms all the time, like public sector reform. But at least with the Recovery and Resilience Fund, we have opportunity to see big changes and steps ahead. And this is what we want to achieve. Of course, that some reforms which are long-lasting and ongoing will not finish with Recovery and Resilience Fund. They will continue, but at least we will see changes in a positive way.
Well, that is certainly the aspiration, to see change that is positive. Anna, let me ask you regarding the rule of law. Do you think this is one of the major conditionalities? Is it the most important area that we have to think about?
Yes, definitely. And I was listening to Ivana quite carefully and quite pleased to hear her comments. For us, and I think generally in every democratic country or region, the rule of law, it's of paramount importance, as well as the independence of justice. And unfortunately, we've been suffering from a highly politicized judicial system in Portugal. And quite recently, in fact, there's been two political groups in the European Parliament, the EPP and the Renew Europe group, complaining just about the Portuguese process for appointing the EPO candidate for prosecutor. And this illustrates how politicized the system is. So for us, it's quite good that member states might want to spend money on digitalization of the judicial system and bringing IT, upgrading their IT facilities and accelerating cases, but they need to first of all look into past cases that have been unsolved and have been blocked for political reasons. This does not play well in Europe and does not play well on the EU and overall on the whole project. I think it's important for the Commission and other institutions to put pressure on member states to actually solve these cases. It's just in 2021, it's a bit unacceptable that investors have been expropriated in such a manner without any solution so far.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to come on to Luke a little bit about investment in just a moment. But Natalie, let me ask you, I'm seeing a lot of questions come in as well from our audience already. We'll start taking those in a moment. But Natalie, how will the Commission enforce respect for the rule of law in errant member states? I mean, what are the instruments that you can really use?
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I think this is an excellent question, and I think I would like to start by giving an example of reforms that we have been able to convey successfully in application of the rule of law. And just to give you a fantastic achievement of last week, where there has been a major reform undertaken in Cyprus by the Supreme Court to enhance the efficiency and the effectiveness of their rule of procedure for civil law. So we do here in DG support have the possibility to bring forward a lot of support to the member state who wish to undertake meaningful reforms through the rule of law and for the implementation of the rule of law and rule of law report. Now, turning to where things go less well, well, I do believe that Commissioner Reinders and other commissioners do have very important tools in order to ensure enforcement of the rule of law. And we have seen it in recent debates that there were some voices raised regarding actions to be undertaken in the member states. I do believe that within the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, there will be possibilities for the Commission to act on its support, on its financial support, should the rule of law not be respected.
Thank you. Luke, let me ask you then a little bit of another follow-up question there regarding distribution of funds. I have a question here coming in from one of our audience members saying, sorry, I just moved again. Sorry. What are the possibilities to have a score system, perhaps, to measure the outcome of reforms or a clawback recourse procedure, just in case things go wrong? Javier Aras asking that. Do you expect to have these things? Sorry, Luke, I think that possibly a question for you, or maybe Natalie, but Luke, if you want to have a stab at it first. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential instruments, but I think these are just two that Javier is raising.
Okay, thanks. Maybe I have a go, and Natalie, please come in. Thanks for that. The way the RF is constructed is indeed based on the definition ex ante of a number of milestones and targets, which should exemplify the results that the RF should achieve in different countries. We discussed the 6-year implementation period. Obviously, and Eulalia is very right, it is difficult to foresee 6 years in advance what you want to do. It is difficult for any organization, and it is very much also in this case of huge economic uncertainty post-crisis, but also huge transformation of the growth model that we want to achieve, in particular the green and digital transition. So we are aware of the uncertainty and difficulty of exercise, and this is why we have engaged very hands-on with the member states to help define these milestones and targets. These would be, if you wish, the benchmark in terms of achievements, and there is indeed the possibility to amend over time, depending on how things happen, and there are flexibilities foreseen in the regulation. By the way, and Ivana mentioned it as well, the opinion of the Court of Auditors on the RRF, which was very relevant and topical last autumn, was also very much a benchmark for the finalization of the regulation. And the regulation benefited a lot from the initial ideas of the court, and this is also how it was improved to such an extent that we are able to face a number of challenges. For the delivery of the facility itself, there will be a number of monitoring scoreboard instruments set up, which will allow to report on progress. Member states will also be invited to report regularly, so there is a monitoring system in place. If there are major problems in the sense of irregularities, we may come to the question of fraud. As we know, we have a zero tolerance for fraud, but we need to be equipped to prevent and correct cases of irregularities. There is also the possibilities, like for the EU funds, to recover part of the money. But of course, that is an extreme situation, and everything we're trying to do is to have very robust internal control system at national level, together with the Commission, to make sure that there is a sound management from the start. Stop here.
Thank you. Eulalia, I think you wanted to come in a little bit on rule of law as well.
Yeah, just to say something on that. I mean, we have this new rule of law mechanism, as Ivan has said, but it's important also to highlight that in the negotiation in the latest compromise on the rule of law mechanism, it was added this question that the rule of law mechanism, it will be a last resort instrument, meaning that we will use it when we will not have other provisions in the sectoral regulations to make use of it, to react to cases of rule of law, breaches of rule of law. And in this respect, I think in the facility, one thing that I think it's a bit missing is that we don't have a general provision for recoveries. I mean, it is said that the Commission will be authorized to recover money in case there are irregularities that have not been corrected by the member state. But there is no specific provision in the regulation, and the authorization is left to the budgetary agreements that the Commission will sign with each member state. Now, that can be seen as a good thing or as a bad thing. A good thing because maybe we'll have more details in the specific budgetary commitments, and maybe we'll have a recovery procedure that is more automatic and more quicker to put into place than the recovery procedure that we have in the Cohesion Fund policy, which is quite slow, and it is. I mean, it has never been used, net corrections in cohesion policy funds, so it's not very effective. But also, it's a bit problematic that we don't have this general provision for the Commission to do the recoveries. And just one other thing to say, I mean, that's the thing that it's a bit worrying for me. The good thing is that I think the Commission has very much understood that we have to focus on this rule of law country-specific recommendations. So the member states that have received country-specific recommendations related with rule of law, the Commission has explicitly asked them to do progress on that, and that's very good.
Now, when it comes to rule of law, Ivana, I mean, there's our concerns, our questions. I mean, there's also the issue of Article 7 procedures. How do you see this tying into this overall landscape that we're looking at in COVID recovery?
Well, we will actually see how this will function in practice, and I'm sure that the Commission will find a solution also for this recovery elements, which are definitely not completely defined, but somehow in the nature of the Recovery and Resilience Fund, we can see a potential solution, because basically member states will receive funds based on the achievement of the milestones and targets and respect of the conditionalities, among which are also conditionalities related to the rule of law, and as I said, connection with the reforms, which are also connected with the rule of law. So basically, if milestones and targets are not achieved, then member state will not receive funding, and if it is achieved, of course they will receive funding which are requested. So somehow with this recovery, there is even no this retroactive perspective, because it is simply based on the analysis. The solution will be that the money will not be disbursed, even though probably costs appeared in the practice during the implementation. So we will see, and of course we are all working on control mechanisms to implement all these elements.
Thank you. Well, let's now, I mean, we've talked, I think, a lot about the problems that we possibly see in certain countries, the issues that we need to tie these, the conditionalities that we need to tie to the funds. Let's now have a look for a while about the financing of the funds, because of course it doesn't all just come from the Commission's own pot. And I wanted to ask and get into the questions about innovative financing and how that is going to work. One of the questions is, how to make sure that investors who are going to buy the EU bonds feel confident and have trust in what they're buying into. Let me ask Luc a specific question regarding the EU bilateral treaties that are now terminated. How, with the absence of that, does one encourage trust in investors?
Yeah, as you may know, the EU has some experience in terms of borrowing from the market. It was, of course, on a much lower scale, but it has been happening for years, including during the previous great financial crisis. The EU was very instrumental in putting together rescue funds for a number of countries in the absence of other instruments. And the borrowing has continued for a number of activities, such as macro financial assistance to third countries. So there is some experience of that at EU level. And now we have seen a very positive and encouraging experience over the last year or so through the creation of a so-called SURE instrument. The SURE instrument was set up to support national short-time work schemes to protect jobs and avoid the destruction of employment. And it has proven extremely effective. And you may have followed the creation of SURE in record time again. We're talking last spring in a matter of weeks. And the instrument was operational as of the end of this summer. And already 19 member states, I believe, have benefited from it. Close to 100 billion, around 90 plus billion, have been borrowed and mobilized for the sake of supporting member states' national instruments. And this is money raised on the markets, passed on to the member states. And this different SURE raising of money has been a success from the point of view of, let's say, an investing strategy. So what is being set up now is a similar way of proceeding. As you know, the Commission will only be able to start borrowing in the context of NextGenerationEU once the so-called own resources decision will have been ratified by all member states. This is in the process of happening, but it's not yet done. So we need to wait for this final decision to be ratified to start the borrowing. But we are hopeful that this will go fine, and we are also very much encouraged by the experience of the SURE program over the last year.
Thank you. Anna, let me turn to you then and ask, what is it that investors would like to see? I mean, post termination of the intra-EU bilateral treaties. So is it that reinstatement of the bilateral treaties, or is there some other mechanisms that you would like to see the Commission putting into place to create security?
Well, yes, in fact, the BITs were terminated last year, but even before, when they existed, that hasn't prevented some member states for discriminating an international investor compared to the domestic one. In fact, in the case at hand with the Banco Espírito Santo and Novo Banco, the only impacted bonds notes that were trapped were notes held by international investors, not Portuguese, and that those notes were subject to Portuguese law, and that's why they've been able to, delay the proceedings in Portugal for so long. So, also, I wanted to mention that what is important is to have reassurances. And clearly, the termination of the BITs is not a good sign either, because it means that discrimination can occur with no guarantee. So overall, it's not good for legal certainty from investor side. I think the fact that the SURE bonds have been largely or partially a success so far, although there are some question marks on the future amounts, but the scale of the RRF is significantly higher. So we're not talking about 100 billion. We're talking about much more. So we have serious concerns. I think we as investors, in any case, we will be having serious doubts of investing heavily unless a number of guarantees are secure. And I think it's all in the interest of the EU and the EU Commission to ensure that this is being, that there is a reform, there is a redress, and there should be a commitment to ensure that this happens. So, yeah.
Luke, did you want to react to that?
No. I mean, I mentioned the point about Shaw and the fact that we're talking close to 100 billion over 1 year. So it shows the amount of money, and for the Next Generation EU program, this will be over 6 years indeed. So we are reaching this kind of cruising speed. As I said, the conditions for the borrowing are not yet in place. It will depend on the own resources decision being ratified, and we are very much inviting all member states to proceed rapidly. And as I said, this is in the process of happening.
Ilalia, let me return to you to get your thoughts on these sorts of ideas. I mean, can you envisage what sort of assurances need to be given to investors to encourage them to actually buy into the EU bonds?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm not an expert on this side of the RRF, so I tend to work more on the management of the EU funds rather than on the borrowing part of the EU funds. The only thing I can say is that from an outsider perspective, of course, that's the third novelty of RRF, actually. We're talking about these two novelties, the fact that we are trying to link investment with reforms, the fact that we are using a different delivery system. And the third big novelty is that the Commission is going to borrow much more money than before. I mean, as Luke said, it's not the first time that the Commission did this. There are borrowing and lending operations for a long time, but until now, they have been a much smaller size, and they have been always used through back-to-back loans. That means that there has not been much strategy in terms of how to borrow the money and where to borrow, to which investors to borrow the money. So now we are going to a different scale and a different strategy of borrowing for the Commission. But I cannot enter into the specific details because it's not my field of expertise, actually.
Okay, thank you very much. Natalie, let me put you a question here from one of our audience members, Matteo Vespa, is asking, how will the Commission ensure civil society is involved as prescribed in the regulation?
Very interesting question, but I guess you're referring now to the Recovery and Resilience Facility regulation, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not directly in charge, but what I can respond to this is that the involvement is ensured at member states levels in the preparation and in the implementation of the National Recovery and Resilience Facility. At European level, at the same time, you have seen that we have now launched the conference on the future of Europe, which is really creating a huge platform and associating the civil society to the reforms and giving the possibility of everyone to provide input and to launch different areas of reflection. So I would see the possibility to act for the civil society at two levels, at member states levels in the context of the preparation and implementation of the national recovery and resilience plans, and at European level, both through the direct access to the European institution and the possibility to send some questions and have some exchanges, and through the conference on the future of Europe.
Thank you very much. Ivana, let me ask you, how can the RRF rebalance the EU's cohesion further to the COVID crisis, increasing the gap between countries? I mean, we've seen the impact of the pandemic. It really has been damaging. So what exactly can the RRF rebalance?
This is very, very interesting question, because this is something what we also touch upon in our opinion, and we said that distribution of funds, when we look into the allocation of RRF, almost 75%, actually 2/3 of the total amount goes to the member states which GDP is higher than 90% of EU average. So basically, cohesion countries will get, of course, again, substantial amount also from RRF, but also the most developed countries will receive additional funding. this is why we highlighted the need for this complementarity and synergy, because cohesion countries will, of course, at the same time receive additional amounts from the cohesion policy. So ESI funds are secured in MFF 21-27, and because of that, they will, together with RRF, have almost double funding in some cases. And this together, so cohesion policy together with RRF in cohesion country can make a difference and change in a way that they will be supported heavily, even though the distribution of RRF is not like equally in terms of level of development. But together with cohesion policy, cohesion countries will be well supported. And now the question is, of course, as I said at the beginning, absorption, because many of them are still struggling with absorption of the envelope from 2014-20. And now on top of that, they are receiving new one. On top of that, there is this need for speed for RRF, because we have only 6 years, as we said. So everything is now mixed together. And there is a challenge actually, which we also highlighted, that maybe ready-to-go projects, which could be financed from the cohesion policy, will now move to RRF, and then we will again have bottlenecks with the cohesion policy and low absorption of the cohesion policy in the period 21-27, what we definitely don't want to happen. So because of that, administrative capacity will be really, really crucial, and invest in project preparation also. And somehow Commission with the technical assistance, which is envisaged, should also support this and think about these elements.
Thank you. Luke, same question to you about what the RRF can do to rebalance cohesion post-COVID. And I think that ties in quite nicely to a question from our audience member, which is asking, what can the EU do for the member states to really include local and regional authorities in the implementation of the RRF?
No, thanks for that. Indeed, you may remember last year when the regulation was set up, there was a lot of discussion about the allocation key and how the money would be distributed across countries. And the way it was done allows to make sure that countries which were most hit by the crisis will in effect benefit most from the tool. As you know, I mean, the COVID crisis was a shock to everyone. Everybody was impacted, but some were more impacted than others due to the exposure to the pandemic, but also to their economic structures and the importance of the service sector and the tourism sector in particular. And as I said, these countries will be able to bounce back better thanks to the Recovery and Resilience Facility. In the Commission, we produced a macroeconomic simulation of the potential impact of the RRF, and we see a positive impact for everyone, also thanks to the positive spillovers across economies, but we see a stronger impact for countries which were lagging behind. So there is definitely a boost to cohesion thanks to the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And we, by the way, also see a positive impact for countries which have a higher debt to GDP level. So in a way, the RRF is also helpful to reduce vulnerabilities across Europe. Now, of course, these were macroeconomic simulation. Everything depends on the quality of what is being put forward, and we will have to analyze in detail the potential impact of the plans that are being put forward. You're right to say that a key success criterion will be the ownership and the involvement of actors locally, regionally, at national level. The Commission has insisted a lot on that in the preparation. Member states are asked to report on how they have involved stakeholders in their plans. So this is also an aspect we will be looking at. And it is very important that this partnership continues in the delivery phase.
Thank you. Anna, let me come to you and ask you what sort of tools you think maybe or what sort of results may come out of the RRF in terms of balancing differences between different regions and areas in the European Union.
Well, if I may, I just might want to add one comment to what Luc just said, which is obviously civil society should be involved, but definitely the investment side of the whole project. So investors should also be taken into account, and investors' interest should be taken into account. So hopefully there is a much more integration of investors' key demands going forward. In particular, on the topics we discussed earlier on the rule of law, legal certainty, ensuring judiciary, legal proceedings are taking place on a timely manner. And I also wanted to raise one comment regarding the technical support instrument that Natalie mentioned earlier on, in case I don't have the chance to raise it, which is there any way that through the technical support instrument, the Commission could potentially try to help member states to sort out some difficulties, maybe in ensuring some reforms that to date hasn't occurred or haven't occurred? So this is, I'm not answering your question, Jennifer, I understand, but this is something that it's quite important for me to learn from both, particularly from Natalie, as to how potentially this technical support instrument could be leveraged and used to solve those. She was mentioning some examples in other member states where have been subject to recommendations, also in judiciary and administrative reforms. But so I wanted to know whether, what's the role of this technical support instrument in potentially solving the issue we have at hand with the politicization of the Portuguese judicial system, for example? Thank you.
Natalie, do you want to briefly respond to that before I come back to the question of cohesion?
Yes, of course. And thank you, Anna, for asking this question. Well, we are precisely intervening to bring support to the member state for them to launch really growth-enhancing measures and profound reforms. So we have already supported member states for bringing forward changes in the organization of the judicial system. We can intervene in the area of public administration. We have the possibility to provide direct technical assistance, advice to the member states. We can organize dialogues with them. We can organize trainings with them. Last week, we have launched a common project for a green budgeting training with the participation of 18 member states. So we can have support measures addressed at one member state or support measures addressed at a various group of member states. And it works quite effectively. We have the possibility to conduct annual projects, but we're also launching more and more multi-annual projects. And all this, of course, can be linked with the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So we provide assistance to the member state to meet, for example, the green and digital objectives of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, but also to meet other parts of these plans and to facilitate their implementation. So the response to Anna is yes, we can. And we do act upon the initiative of the member states, but also in the preparation of the Technical Support Instrument 2022, we are going to present to the member states a selection of projects which we are going to call the flagship projects, and then it will be up to the member states to decide, of course, if they wish to make use of this offer of specific support.
And Natalie, just from my side, a quick follow-up question, if I may. What is the level of oversight from the European Parliament or other bodies that might be involved?
Are you now referring to the Recovery and Resilience Facility or to the Technical Support Instrument?
Oh gosh, I've lost my thought. The recovery.
So I will let Luc respond to that one.
Yeah.
No, so I think a great asset of the Recovery and Resilience Facility is that it is a community-based instrument. It was set up within the framework of the EU institutions, and this is perhaps a lesson we've learned from past experiences as well. And this has allowed the Parliament to be the co-legislator on the regulation. And indeed, as I mentioned, the regulation was significantly developed throughout the autumn, also in light of the opinion of the Court of Auditors, and it entered into force only 3 months ago, mid-February. But this has the imprint of both the Parliament and the Council. And I think this is also important in terms of ownership and delivery, and certainly in terms of transparency and scrutiny for the operation. And by the way, it gives also the full right to other actors, such as the Court of Auditors, the EU Anti-Fraud Office, the European Public Prosecutor Office, to get into the delivery mode alongside the Commission. So this is, I think, a very important guarantee for the success of the plan. Now, in the delivery of the facility, there will be different regular moments. There is a process agreed with the Parliament, recovery and resilience dialogue, to which the Commission is committed. And there will be regular moments also of taking stock. So there will be constant exchange of information and involvement. For now, we are in the phase of assessing, receiving, and soon assessing the plan. And hopefully this will move fast so that first proposal for decision from the Commission will come before the summer.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting confused between which Commission representative represents which area. Ivana, let me turn to you now and ask about the use of funds. And Eulalia, I want to bring you in on this as well. So talk a little bit about how to ensure that funds are implemented in a transparent way.
Yes, this is of course very important. Yes, thank you. This is of course very important, and so first step is definitely adoption of the plans, and in the plans many things have to be defined and described. We see that in the assessment criteria which are in the regulation, and the Commission will assess internal control system in the member states and also monitoring and implementation system. And this is of course something what has to ensure proper spending and transparency of the spending. So we have like several layers of monitoring and controls. First one is at the level of the member states. Good is that they will use existing structures, so we don't have time to develop completely new structures to deal with the RR funding, but of course that these structures will have to be analyzed, that we can really say that member state is ensuring proper spending and also transparent spending and use of the recovery and resilience resources. Then next layer is of course European Commission, so they will monitor and control what is going on at the level of the member states, and then European Court of Auditors, we will also do our job. Now first step is this auditing of preparation, actually Commission assessment of the preparation of the national recovery and resilience plans, and then of course we will audit other processes and see if really milestones and targets are achieved, if what is said in the paper really happened in the practice. And as Luke said, we will also have this oversight and monitoring from other institutions, from the European Parliament especially, because this every 2 months dialogue, which is envisaged, will be very open, transparent, and everybody will be able to ask what they want, what they need, additional information if they need, so everything will be discussed thoroughly. So the whole process, even though everything has to be done very quickly, will be carefully monitored in order to ensure legal and regular spending and transparent spending all over Europe.
Thank you. Eulalia, same question to you, just to reflect on how we need to be transparent about how funds are spent in order to reassure trust in the public as much as anything else.
Yeah, I will follow up from what Ivana has said. I think I agree in all of it. I just wanted maybe to make 3 points on that. The first is that, of course, the system will be, we will have to spend the money quicker than in cohesion policy funding. As in cohesion policy funding, there is this generic obligation of member states to prevent, identify, and detect fraud. So they will have to put into place anti-fraud measures. But if we want to go quicker, these anti-fraud measures have to be specifically cost-effective this time, meaning that we don't have to create a lot of burden, a lot of controls, and a lot of lengthy process at the national level. And in this respect, there are two things that are very cost-effective to detect fraud. One is the use of data analytic tools, big databases that allows the management authorities to flag the risky projects, the projects in which there is some indicator that there might be some fraud. And the other one is transparency and disclosure of information so that everybody can know where the money goes, everybody meaning civil society, journalists, individual persons, and then everybody can track a bit where the money goes. In these two things, I think that the Commission has to be much more, it has to be specifically exigent with member states on the use of data analytic tools, and the Commission will offer a specific single data analytic tool for all member states. The best would be that all member states use this single data analytic tool, because it's a data analytic tool that allows to merge information from all member states, and that facilitates even more the identification of cases of fraud. But if this is not the case, at least member states have to put into place this type of data analytic instruments. And on disclosure, I think it's a bit surprising that the obligations of disclosure for the facility are not as high as for cohesion policy funds, for instance. In cohesion policy funds, member states are obliged to put a public website, all the operations that have been financed by cohesion policy funds, and this is not the case for the facility. If you look at the regulation, the article about publicity and transparency, it's more about giving visibility to the EU funding and showing that the RRF has been used. But there is no specific obligation for member states to put a list of all operations financed by the facility. There is obligation to transmit this information at the EU level for the purpose of controls and audits, but not to put it open to all the people. And third point, maybe difference, contrary to what happens with the cohesion policy funding, there will be less reporting obligations, meaning that the member states will have to report less. The detail of reporting, it will be less important than for cohesion policy funding. So they will have to report, of course, on milestones, on targets. They will have to do twice per year a declaration of management and a list of the audits they have done. But in general terms, the EU level, we have much less information of where the money goes, and particularly there will not be this specific obligation to report on large irregularities to OLAF. And that means that we need more investigative capacity at the EU level, because there will be less flow of information coming from member states to the EU level. If we want to detect fraud at the EU level, we have to reinforce OLAF and we have to reinforce EPO also, which are the two EU institutions in charge of investigating this type of problems.
Thank you. Natalie, may I turn now to you just to get your wrap-up thoughts as well as we're approaching the end of our discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. I think all this is very interesting, and just I wanted to rebound on what Eulalia said, but I guess Luc will want to say more. I mean, there are differences certainly in terms of the drafting and the organization of the Recovery and Resilience Facility regulation compared to the national, the cohesion, the regional instruments and funds. But do not forget the major innovation that was set by the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is that the advancement of the funds is going to be performance-based and is going to depend on the member states meeting qualitative milestones and quantitative targets. And I do believe that there is going to be a lot of transparency, and I think that the regular control of the European Parliament through the regular debate is going to provide to be a very strong asset. And I should remind that there is a specific working group which has been set up in between the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee and the Budgetary Committee of the European Parliament. So there is going to be a very, very strong control on the budgetary side of the work. Now, from what I am concerned, all that I can say is just reiterate that the technical support instrument can come in support to the reforms that are going to be undertaken by the member states to bring growth. I did not yet have the opportunity to say a quick word on what is going to be absolutely key to recovery and resilience, which is the quality of public administrations in Europe. We have published a document a few weeks ago, a staff working document on a modern public administration. There are going to be discussions in the context of a summit organized in Portugal by the presidency in the month of June. So I really see the issue of the quality, the efficiency, the modernization of public administration and governance at the center, at the core, around which we can build all the growth enhancing reforms and then all the measures within the recovery and resilience facility that are going to support the twin transition, the green and digital transition, and bring back growth in Europe, but a growth that is going to be directed at every single region and at every single actor, be it a company or be it a private citizen. This growth must be absolutely inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Ivana, can I ask you for a very brief 30 seconds, 1 minute wrap up? I know you've covered most of the ground already.
Yes, thank you very much. I will refer a little bit on this transparency again. As Eulalia said, not many things are in the RRF regulation, but they are in the financial regulation. And the fact that Recovery and Resilience Fund is performance instrument doesn't mean that basic financial management and control principles doesn't need to have to be respected. So we really have to think about that and how to make as much as possible information public, so available to everybody, because this is then the right way how to protect financial interest of the European Union. Because if everything is visible, then civil societies, citizens will be able to spot irregularities, mistakes, fraud, potential corruption, conflict of interest, and report on this. So transparency is indeed extremely important, and I hope that actually member states will follow the principles which they already apply in their budget and also for ESI funds, and that we will not go step backward in use of recovery and resilience funds. So definitely this is new modern instrument, performance oriented, but basic principles must be respected, and I'm sure that we all together will be able to ensure this and be transparent and open to everybody.
Thank you. Luc, can I turn for your wrap-up thoughts? Perhaps even maybe just give us a timeline view for the rest of the year, what's coming up, just as your final thoughts, please.
No, thanks a lot. Maybe a few thoughts to conclude. First, to say that these are early days for the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Yeah? So everything we discuss today is very timely and indeed will be at the core of our work for the coming months and years. Second thought is really to insist again on the new nature of the instrument, the performance-based nature of this instrument. There is an excellent paper by Eulalia which gives a lot of more details, but what I want to say about this instrument is that what is important to bear in mind is that the member states are the beneficiaries of the fund. So it is member states' money that will cover the detailed investment and reforms on the ground, but as such, the beneficiaries of the facility are the member states, and this explains the whole delivery mode that was foreseen in the regulation. And that's important to reflect, bear in mind, and incorporate in our work. A third remark is that, as we discussed, it is very good that the RF regulation is anchored on the EU treaty, that the delivery mode is totally shaped by EU rules. Ivana just mentioned the financial regulation, and this is a strong guarantee for the sound management of the facility. And a last remark is that, of course, it is partly a new venture for all of us to engage in this facility, and it will mean different things for different countries, and that is normal because priorities differ. So we will have to become much more granular, much more case by case. We will also need to develop new interactions, new partnerships based on existing ones with actors on the ground, and it all depends on us to make it a success. But I would be confident that this happens. In terms of timeline, as I said, we are reviewing the plans that have been put forward already. If my counting is correct, 18 plans have come in, more to come in the coming weeks and months. The Commission has about 2 months to assess these plans. Then it will be for decision within 1 month by the Council. So you can see a number of decisions happening before, definitely before the summer break, and then implementation will start. So things are moving fast. Just to recall, the regulation entered into force 3 months ago. So the work is going at full speed, and it will continue at that pace, I assume, in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Don't envy you your workload over the next few months as well. Finally, Anna, your thoughts on what you've heard today. Give us your remarks before we wrap up.
Yes. Starting from the beginning, clearly, this is about reforms and investment, and obviously from the investor point of view, for us, what we would like is to have redress by EU member states, reforms by EU member states as a condition of receipt of EU recovery funds, particularly of the judiciary. We would like respect for the rule of law in member states, and particularly not to be influenced by politics or politicians. We would like to have redress for past investors. And in our case, we've been waiting for the last 6 years with absolutely no information as to when this will be solved. And finally, we need reassurances for the future investors and for us to be able to be investing in the future RRF bonds. We need to have those reassurances on legal certainty, rule of law that we mentioned earlier on. So those are for us the most important topics: reforms, respect for rule of law, redress, and reassurances. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you indeed, ladies and gentlemen, all of you, for your points and your thoughts. And thank you to the audience for so many questions. We couldn't possibly get to all of them, ranging from things like environmental harm to unemployment policy. It's a really vast topic that we can't quite squeeze into just 1 hour and a quarter. But thank you very much for your attention and your views. Remember, please do keep the conversation going using the hashtag EA Debates. We've been discussing the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Thank you to Recover Portugal for supporting us today. But also keep an eye out, as there will be several more Euractiv debates on all the topics that matter to you in the coming days.